I watched a TED Talk by Marguerite Vestager. Vestager's TED Talk was mostly about living in a completely different monopoly. Basically, during the course of Vestager's TED Talk, she basically explained the biggest ways of how. Well, she first actually started talking about how much our world has basically changed. She said that um, long ago, before the European Union even formed, there was nothing but a whole bunch of people just representing their own countries. But eventually, a bunch of representatives from different countries came to Rome so they can sign a contract. This contract would eventually end up becoming efficient, as this would eventually begin the creation of the European Union. And this union, of course, was signed so that way human suffering that happened during World War II wouldn't happen to anyone else in the world. Um, basically, um, Vestager brought this up because the world basically wanted a Europe that was made for people. What she meant by this was she didn't want a Europe that the world didn't really want to remember Europe as this war-torn country that wanted to invade other countries around the world, as well as cause human casualties to different people in different countries. They wanted a Europe basically made for people to enjoy or get to know, which eventually we actually did get to, especially because Europe is full of many great cities as well as many national landmarks that are around. Basically, the European Union had rules to defend fair competition, as well as services and innovation. I actually kind of find this to be true because basically, yet in a business standpoint, right, countries sometimes do meet with other countries to discuss deals. We know that Europe is one of them, as well as the US, as well as other factors like different continents in other different countries. See, we basically call it this because we can't let business compete, because competition is not really fair for businesses. It kind of shows that the game isn't over. For what this basically means is that we can't really better ourselves as a country or say like we're better than you guys. This basically states that competing in business isn't really over. For, from looking at that standpoint, I kind of thought about it a little bit, and basically, business for people, I think it should always be a draw or a tie because while businesses, of course, thrive and are different from one another, they should all basically be reaching towards the same goal, which is to make their consumers happy as well as to make sure that the business is efficient enough to last for decades to come. This shows that basically um, we need to just be careful with who we're doing business with. Mark Vestager also brought up that temptation is very powerful when it comes to this because basically we get tempted lots by demons sometimes, and we decide to take it a little step further, even though sometimes this can lead to problems down the road later on in the future. Vestager also brought up the factors of greed and fear. Here, she brought these up because they are actually linked to power because they are both terrible. Well, because as we know, those two emotions, they basically end up making us people we're not. Greed can basically mean we get jealous and do whatever it takes to succeed, even if that means cheating or trying to make deals behind people's backs. And fear, of course, means that we don't exactly know what we're doing, but we decide to do it anyway, or we just choose to not do it at all. This basically makes competition very tough as well as successful because we're basically being afraid to do what we think is correct. Um, a huge example Vestager brought up was with car suppliers. She said that long ago, when automobiles were first being created, they said car suppliers relied only on a few people to make vehicles. Eventually, as the business eventually grew, there of course had to be some problems. Basically, a lot of criminal ones. And she actually brought up an example. She's the biggest criminal investigation or car parts can undermine the competition. This kind of show that basically when you bring in this new innovation into the world, this can kind of show how much the business world will change as well as the world around you. We actually help the market work fairly because if we don't work fairly, if we don't think about competition, I find this to be true because we're trying to all to survive. Anybody who works for a business or even owns a business knows that basically we're trying to work fair. And a majority of the time, we don't think about the competitors because we think we're going to be okay. Now, it is reasonable to think about competition and how competitors are doing because you want to see exactly what you can improve on and see exactly um, what they don't have that you have. Basically, um, the market is not really satuli, which basically means that it's a lack of trust in the market. Market will head to lack of trust in society. I mean, the market is not society. Basically, what this means is um, the market, as well as the business market, it's not a society. We're not like a group of people who are composed of people who want to just be in a business. Basically, we're in the market every day, which means that we're going to businesses all the time. That can range from any type of store to a hospital or anything else out there. Basically, we're out there. No matter where we go, we know there's always going to be people behind a desk or something that's going to need our assistance. Even though we are in the market, we're not a society because we don't really 100% agree on everything. And if we did, while it might seem like a nice idea, it probably is going to hurt us because not everybody has the exact same opinion. This also plays into the role of trust. Basically, it plays in because as employees, we have to trust people. And even as bosses or even in upper management, we need to trust the employees knowing what they're doing. And basically, without it, life will become a lot harder because we're not doing our responsibility to care or even trust the employees with their responsibilities. This creates a lot more attention for the employees because they feel like they're not being cared about, and this creates a lot more attention for um, people who are in charge in upper management because this basically means that they have a lot more on their hands than they really want to do. Vesker also brought up the fact of how technology can create challenges to trust. As we know, our world is becoming a lot more technologically advanced and we're always relying on technology. While we know it's good, it can't always be trustful. I think a huge example that I think would play in is a automatic online schedule. This means that basically you can get text your schedule depending on where you work at so you can know what you're working during the week. While it is a good tool as well as a good reminder, at the same time it also could hurt them because some people may not even look at their phone or even pay attention to what they have to do. Basically, trust cannot be imposed, it needs to be earned. I'm pretty sure every single one of us has learned this because we know that the only way we're ever going to get through to anybody or prove to people we actually care is we need to know that we trust them and so that way they can trust us in return. Basically, from watching the TED Talk, it taught me a lot that um, in markets today, we're basically doing what we can to thrive as well as succeed. But at the same time, we're trying our best to know if we can actually do well. And we can't let our emotions get the best of us. And we should know that basically we need to create exactly what the people of this world want, not exactly what we want.